Good day. I'm Michael Sabatino, City Council member in the 3rd District here in Yonkers.
And I'm Ivy Reeves, and you're watching Fade to Black, a weekly series about real people, real experiences, and real talk. Today we have two very special guests with us today, Brother Malik, who is the founder of New Heads Mentor Programs, and Linda Tarrant Reed, author, historian, and journalist. Today our topic is the prison system, the American prison system. And today, but first, before we talk about the American prison system, we just want to let you all talk a little bit about yourselves and let the viewers know who you are and what you do.
Okay, first, I'm Brother Malik, Hotep family. I've started the New Heads movement. It's a mentorship program for young men between the ages of 8 and 13, and they also go from 14 to 21 years old out of the city of Yonkers. Let me just be very, very brief. Coming to the city, there was such a dearth in situations as they pertain to young African and Hispanic men that I took it upon myself to go in the streets and be the Pied Piper, to talk to the young men as far as loving themselves, learning more about themselves, and also dealing with the crime as it pertains to African and Hispanic men in the streets in the city of Yonkers.
Okay. And Linda?
Hi. Well, I'm very happy to be here. My name is Linda Tarrant Reed, and I am an author, historian, and journalist. My new book is Discovering Black America from the Age of Exploration to the 21st Century. And it's geared to middle school readers, which I think is a very important group of people, students to reach. But because the book is being so well received, many age levels appear to be enjoying it. So I'm very blessed about that.
Excellent, beautiful. This is the book here, and Linda has been around Yonkers yesterday, I believe it was, and
Yes.
she's been on News 12. So I want to take a look at this, and I might need to purchase one myself as well. But in the meantime, we're going to talk about the American prison system and how it affects us as Black Americans, how it affects our children, and do we really think it's the American prison system? Now it says that, and I'm going to read some stats here because I found them absolutely astounding. It says currently there are 2.2 million Americans behind bars, and they cost the country cost the country $60 billion. That's a lot of money. And, it says from December 31st, there were an estimate of 491 prisoners per 100,000 United States residents, up from 411 in the year of 1995. So we have quite a problem here. And when you really look at it, most of the prisoners that are in the prison system are Black men.
Yeah, if I just might add, there's, according to the report of the Department of Justice, Blacks and Hispanics were approximately 3 times more likely to be searched during traffic stops than white motorists, and African Americans were twice as likely to be arrested, almost 4 times. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that. I know the governor in his State of the State addressed this issue a couple of weeks ago, and is sort of advocating because some of our young people are getting imprisoned for maybe just marijuana possession or some minor infractions, and it's really putting a strain on the system, and we have to look at how we treat these kinds of infractions and maybe do some kind of rehab or something like that. So with all of that said, maybe you can share with us some of your experiences, Brother Malik.
All right, well, without beating around the bush and biting my tongue, okay, racism and white supremacy is the #1 component in what's going on in America today. It hasn't changed since the 1400s, since we left and was taken from our homeland and brought to these shores. It was the same type of ideal. Now, we call it the prison industrial complex because the prison system is a billion-dollar industry. Billions and billions of dollars are promoted and brought into these facilities when we start talking about what the prison industrial complex is really all about. Let me just tell you, this is very short here. What we talked about, which is true, let me give you the difference for white males ages of 25 to 29. okay, for every 100,000, they incarcerate 1,666. And that same demographic, for the Latino males, ages of, excuse me, 25 to 29, there's 3,606 for every 100,000. Now, for the African, the black male, in that same demographic from 25 to 29, they lock up 12,603 for that same 100,000. So when we talk about the disparity and what's going on in the prison system in this country, I mean, it's not mind-boggling, but you understand it's a continuum of the racism, white supremacy program and process that's been going on for years. And that's the bottom line of what that's all about, without, you know, mincing words.
Right, and some have even said that this, the American prison system, there are more black Americans in prison than there were in slavery back in like 1850. I don't even know what it was, but it's almost like it's a new form of slavery. Go ahead.
The interesting thing about what Brother Malik was saying is that during my research on, you know, discovering Black America, one of the things that I did discover is that when the enslaved came onto the shore and they were being prepared for sale at the slave markets, the slavers would actually put them in cells in the bottom of the pubs, and they would be upstairs transacting business and selling the enslaved downstairs. So the first prison systems were established when the first blacks came ashore as enslaved. So this is a continuum. And so it's really interesting that the sociological and psychological perspective of the jailers was embedded in a historic perspective.
Absolutely. You know, it's really unfortunate that we see this as a continuation of everything that has happened. There are so many things, and when you spoke about, you know, drugs, and you know, the fact that many, and I have something here that says the war on drugs has been waged primarily in communities of color, where people of color are more likely to receive higher offenses, according to the Human Rights Watch. People of color are no more likely to sell or use illegal drugs than whites, but they have a higher rate of arrest. African American comprise of 14% of the regular drug users, but are 37% of those arrested for drug offenses. From 1980 to 2007, about 1 in 3 of the 25.4 million adults arrested for drugs were African Americans. Do you think it's because of our police system and the fact that the people that are so-called policing our communities, I mean, a lot of that has to do with it because a lot of black males and females also are not on those forces. And I think it's a lack of understanding. I'm not really sure, but you guys can comment. There's so many things.
Let me say again, Sister Ivy, racism and white supremacy is a whole construct that keeps this whole thing permeated. We talk about drugs. When drugs was very rampant in our communities, it was okay. But when it hit the European communities, then it became what they call an epidemic. We have to do something now. Until they were impacted, nobody did anything. They turned a blind eye. Now let me bring this up to speed, warp speed. We had that sad situation in Newtown, okay? It's very, very tragic. We were talking in our communities about mental illness in 2008. And nobody gave it a whisper. Nobody said anything about it. No, it's not mental illness. Now that you have something that's going on in Newtown, do you hear that scenario brought into conversation? Mental illness. Same thing with the drugs and the guns. When it hits their communities, excuse me, let's be blunt about this, then it becomes a whole new issue. Now we're talking about mental illness. Why weren't we talking about with the drive-bys with our children? Because that was also a main component of what was going on. Nobody talked about their mental capacities and mental illness. But now we're bringing that up to the fore.
Also, and you all can, you know, comment or whatever, but I think that a lot of people that are in jails are not so much criminals as, like you said, it's a mental disorder. It could be the fact that, you know, with the drug abuse,
I
you
think-
know, they need you know, drug rehabilitation, not so much being thrown into a locked cell, because then we'll come back and we'll talk about the issues of having overcrowded jails and the problems within the jail itself, and how that affects the men, and also the effects that it has on the children that are, you know, whose parents are incarcerated. But you were going to say.
No, I was just
Okay.
listening.
I was going to say that, you know, there's a percentage of people that are incarcerated that, you know, just like Mr. Sabatino was saying, that are there not because they really did anything wrong. It's an economic situation. They're arrested. They don't have money for bail. They don't have money for representation.
Yes.
And so what happens is, once, this is what I think happens, and I'm not an expert, but once you enter that system,
Yes.
you're marked for life.
Yeah.
Because, you know, with the computers and with everything, all they have to do is look it up, and there's your name. So this is a system that, you know, is a trap for Black and Hispanic men. Now, the interesting thing is that I did an article once on stop and frisk. And I don't have the percentages of minorities, but who have been stopped and frisked, as opposed to the white population. But it's exponential, just like the numbers that you just described. So a young gentleman from Brooklyn came up with an app called the Stop and Frisk app, so that this app can be downloaded to your phone, I believe. And you, as an individual, a private citizen, if you see an arrest happening, you can video it, you can film it, and it goes onto the phone, and it's sent directly to the New York Civil Liberties Union.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought this was an interesting concept, especially in this digital age, because, you know, everybody needs to be deputized in a way to protect the rights of everybody.
Absolutely.
I mean, because you look in terms of what happened to that young man, Delroy, up in Westchester, who,
Oh, yeah.
And the cop who got shot.
yes,
Yes.
yes, in White Plains.
White Plains, yes.
Right. So there are many innocent people who are caught in the crossfire or targeted because of the color of their skin.
I think a lot of what needs to be done, and I think we're starting this in Yonkers with, you know, communicating with our local police precincts and stuff. And I know in a couple of the precincts that I represent, I've sort of been encouraging that we have some kind of a community event where we invite all of the police force members, those that are available, to come to a community
It's a
event in the
Blackout
summer.
Tuesday that they do.
Yeah, they do the night out.
Night out.
But
yes.
I think probably we also need to do it on a, you know, individual community rotating basis, where, you know, the police force can get to meet the people in the communities. And I think it's all about developing relationships. And I see a sense where that you know, this concept is starting to be opened, you know, that they're looking into how they can do this, because this benefits everybody.
Yeah.
It makes their job easier,
Easier.
and you know,
And it
the
makes people-
community feels
Well, things are
more
starting to
comfortable.
change in the city of Yonkers. 2 years ago, they just started putting their name tag on their badges. Before, they didn't do that. And they felt at that point in time they could get away with whatever because you could not ID the person.
Right.
But once they start putting a name tag on there, and this just happened. You know, I've been, you know, in the city of Yonkers, I can tell you, you know, there's things that's going on. It's not as bad as we think, but there's change that has to be still. You know,
And I think
we've
that
come a long
change is
way, yes.
coming, and we're
yes,
working.
I like to think so.
We're working, you know, pretty hard on this, and I think you know, with our commissioner now and our police captains, and
That's right.
I think, you know, there's a dialogue that, you know, I've always said that education really is the key
Absolutely.
to everything,
Yes.
Right.
and it's really, and relationship building, and I think that's what we need to see.
Yes.
And I think our night outs have been very successful.
Right. That's right.
And it's a two-way street too.
Mhm.
I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely.
there's always two sides to a story.
Yes.
So we're not saying that that there aren't. There's.
Yes.
Listen, my mother used to say there's good and bad in all kinds, right? So we all have our issues.
But I was interested in the community program because when I was growing up in New Rochelle, we knew the cops. I mean, they were like our friends.
Right.
I mean,
and
so-
that's what we're trying to
and
do.
it was like we had a number of African American police officers. So, they either went to church with us or they knew our family or whatever. So when you saw them cruising, they would stop. They would speak, and it was a really kind of
we
different
have to
environment.
just get back to that.
Yes.
We also have a PAL program where we do a poster contest each year, and
Right.
that brings the community in as well.
And I think you have to start at a young
Yes.
age.
That's
So
And
that
And we have a lot of work to do because these millions of people that are incarcerated, it didn't how do you bring them out now? I mean, it's great that we're doing stuff now, but when we really look at the damage that it's already done, and at the end we'll talk about some of the other more positive things, but in the end when we really look at what's really happening and what has happened to the black community, how it's affected the black family when these when the children of these
Yes.
black Americans have gone to prison, and how that once again you're tearing that family
Yes.
apart, like back in the
Slaves,
slavery,
right.
where all the families were torn apart,
Right.
and so you have children now who have to go to the jails to see their fathers, mostly fathers I say, but there are women, black women
Oh,
are also
absolutely.
being
That has also
incarcerated at a
quadrupled.
higher number.
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
so while we are doing something locally like here in Yonkers and we're trying a New Rochelle, but overall, when we talk about the 50 states of the United States
Yes.
of America, it's a huge problem.
Yes.
Because when these people get out of jail, not only can they not get a job, okay, they can't vote. Okay, so now you're not voting anymore. You're
Right.
not a part of the system to get out and vote, and that power has been taken away. So it's like systematically there's something
That's right.
constantly happening
To keep you down.
yes, to hold them down. So now you mentioned no job, that means no money.
Right.
So it's like a revolving door.
Exactly.
How do I feed my family? How do I feed myself? How do I take care of myself?
And see, I think it's exacerbated because this is such a consumer-oriented society.
Yes.
So every place you go, on the trains, on the buses, on TV, you see the latest product. And so everybody wants that. Everybody wants to be, up to date on the latest. And if you don't have the money, if you don't have a job, many times people get very frustrated. So it's a difficult.
And that's a situation that's
Right.
affecting all
We're getting back
demographics at this
to-
point
Yes,
too.
that's
you know.
true.
Getting back to the prison system, what they used to have more than anything else, they had like the Pell Program, where people
Yes,
could go to school and get educated. So this way, the recidivism would be slowed down more than what it was. They don't have that anymore.
Really.
That's right. So, again, we're talking about